Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Coach Handles Manny here. Just want to get you guys started on learning some basketball training Mythbusters. Let's get started. All right, so first off, one of the biggest training Mythbusters is that you need to start working on your biggest weaknesses in order to develop, and that's not necessarily the case. A lot of players need to work on what their biggest strength is so they can fill into a role. And what happens is with basketball trainers, when we work on our biggest weakness, if you're not the best player at a certain role on your team, now you just end up being what's called a master of none, which means that, let's say, for example, if you're a good shooter, but you're not a great shooter, you're probably like the second or third best shooter on your team. If I look down at the end of the bench as a coach, I'm looking for a guy to put into the game who's the best shooter for missing shooting. That means you don't get in the games, you're not the best shooter. Now, if you've developed your ball handling a little bit, maybe you're the third or fourth best ball handler on the team. When I look in and I need a good driver, I need a good ball handler, you still don't get in the game because you're not the best ball handler on the team. Expanding your role, being the best player that you can be in your role is the most important part, which leads me to my next point, being the master of your role. So my second point is master your role. And so I like to use examples of players, and for the players that I like to use is looking at guys like Kyle Korver versus a guy like maybe Jordan Clarkson. Both played on the same team, and if you look at who played more minutes and who played a bigger role on that team, you would definitely have to say Kyle Korver this past year. And the reason for that is because he mastered his role. While Jordan Clarkson will probably beat him in one-on-one 9 times out of 10 because he's more dynamic, unfortunately the game of basketball just isn't one-on-one. And so when we look to fill a role, he knows what he's good at, and he just does that over and over again. He has mastered his role. And so when you compare him to a guy like Klay Thompson, who's mastered his role and then had an ability to expand on that slowly but surely, now he can hit mid-range jumpers, now he can hit going to the basket using his gravity as a shooter, and that's going to be our next point, expanding our skill set slowly. Alrighty guys, our last point is going to be making sure that we expand our skill set, but slowly. And that slowly is a really big word for me because I want you guys to understand, yes, you guys are going to be getting better at something. It's important to be dynamic. I'm not telling you guys to only be a shooter or only be a driver. You want to be as dynamic as possible, be as dangerous as possible, but the problem that a lot of young players will face is that they try to expand on their responsibilities too early. And it's before they've mastered their role, or they've mastered their role and now they get outside of their role because they do too much on the outside. So looking at like we compared earlier, Rajon Rondo or Kyle Korver, if Rajon Rondo is a driver and he's great at it and he starts shooting the ball, doesn't he start doing the defense a favor by shooting the ball more? Or and conversely, if you look at Kyle Korver, if he starts driving the ball, isn't he doing the defense a favor? Yes, they're working on those things to be as dynamic as possible, but we can't do the defense a favor by not continuing to do what we're best at. We want to mix it up, but continue knowing what you're best at.